So good morning, everybody. Welcome to our McLean County Chamber of Commerce Business Education. My name is Mitch. I'm the programs manager at the Chamber. Today we'll be discussing company culture, how you create it, how to design a company culture where employees actually want to work. We're joined today by Darryl Brown. Darryl's the founder and principal coach of Jumpstart Coaching and Development Solutions. I'll be turning things over to Darryl in just a minute here, but first, before we dive into our topic for today, we want to recognize today's video resource library sponsor, AFNI. By sponsoring our educational programs, the Chamber is able to provide our business eds and town halls to our membership free of charge. All of our business ed presentations can be found on the video resource library on our website at www.mcleancoachamber.org. The video resource library is found under the Member Resources tab on the website. Make sure to check it out to see our past presentations. And for those of you watching this recorded on the VRL, be sure to check in on our events calendar or your Monday morning coffee emails to hear about upcoming business eds so you can register to attend live on Zoom to ask questions of our speakers. And thank you again to all of our sponsors for the video resource library in 2022. All right, well, we will be taking questions as we go today, guys. So feel free to drop it in the chat, raise your hand, pop on to ask some questions of Darryl as we go. Should have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A as well. But other than that, I will get out of your way here and say welcome, Darryl. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for the opportunity. And as Mitch mentioned, I am more of a conversationalist. So please do not let me just kind of go on and on and on and ramble. In college, I did not like lectures as much. I like conversations. And so I'm really hoping that this will be a conversation today. The subject of creating culture and how to build an environment employees want to work in is especially important. And I know it is to each of you. That's why you are here. But your experience is important. What you're experiencing in the field is important. And something you say, something you ask might be something someone else on the call would ask, but they don't. So don't hesitate to kind of reach out if necessary. And I'm talking about just unmuting and speaking if something comes to you. You can put it in the chat. Mitch is going to help me. He's going to help me pay attention to the chat a little bit, but I will be more or less trying to stay engaged with you, if that's okay. Okay, let me go ahead and share my slide here. I will send this slide to Mitch. Give me a second here. Mitch, let me know if you can see my PowerPoint okay, see my screen okay.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. So again, my name is Darryl Brown, founder and coach with Jumpstart Coaching. If you would, I was going to say share your names, but Mitch is going to help me out there. Mitch is going to share your names as well. But if you'd like to introduce yourself to the others that are on the call, please go ahead, put your name in there, your company, and perhaps your role within the chat. I've been a full-time executive coach and leadership coach for the last 7 years. And as Mitch mentioned, we'll probably go through our discussion today for about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll stop for kind of an official Q&A. And we may not even stop for the official Q&A if you guys are engaging me as we kind of go along. Again, I can only see maybe 2 or 3 of your screens, and I cannot see the chat. So please help me out. And I do want you to participate and be involved in that way. I do want to say right now we are experiencing in our, kind of in our society, in our overall general culture, we are experiencing some challenges and have been for the last couple of years, a little bit more than that at this point. I have experienced a lot of resilience within teams and with teams at this point. So just want to encourage you that your teams, the individuals at your organizations are very, very resilient. They are accustomed to change. And some of this that we'll talk about today in terms of creating a culture is really embracing that culture of change. You know, change is a very kind of popular topic within business, within any organization. It's kind of a mainstay of topics because in order to remain relevant as it pertains to business and growth, we have to really be open to change. And so this change as it pertains to the things that we're facing right now are kind of no different, if you will, okay? So why do we work? When I was thinking about how to create a culture, it really is to understand why individuals actually come to work in the first place. And some of these, you know, bills and lifestyle, certain pressures are always going to be a driver for why individuals go to work. But here to the right, you'll see there are other things that are kind of driving why people come to work as well. And one here, talking about deeper meaning, purpose, significance, is always going to be a driver. I think it's probably one of those low-hanging fruit that we really do have to pay attention to within leadership and within any organization, because individuals do want to feel significant. They do want to feel as though when they come to work every day, that it matters, that their presence within your organizations matter. They also want to use their gifts, talents, abilities, and so on for a cause that they believe in. And we'll get into this in a second here, but really that's why I believe, in part came to your organizations, that there was something that they believed in. They did have a skill, they did have an ability that was relevant, that you as the organization felt, hey, I want to bring this individual on. But at the same time, they were drawn to you by your cause, right? By your cause, along with some of these things to the left. And then lastly here, creating certainty. One of the, I guess, more popular words that we've been hearing these days is uncertainty. Well, they are coming to work and they continue to work really hard. Your employees, your team members continue to work really hard to create a certain level of certainty in their lives, right? And you are offering them that. Now, when we take a closer look at culture, I remember a time when I had some dental work done and I was having some bone decay in my mouth, and the dentist took some of the bone out of my mouth and said that he was going to grow bone, but in order to grow some of my bone, he had to remove some of my bone and place my bone in a bone culture. And as he placed my bone in a bone culture, that bone, my bone, grew within that culture. And I want you to kind of take this understanding and this mindset of culture. When you think of culture, it is to place your people, your teams, and your clients, your customers in a certain environment and to see what they do, right? And oftentimes we're placing our teams, our team members and our clients within a certain culture, and we don't necessarily get what we thought we would get. And that's when it's really, really, really important to do some of the things that we'll talk about on the back end, one of which I do a lot of, which is taking assessments and really gathering that information. So as we're looking at culture, understand that the culture represents the ideal environment for producing the desired results. And oftentimes, those desired results, you as maybe the leader, the owner, the manager, the supervisor, have a really good idea as to how to produce the desired result, but your team members are not necessarily as acquainted with that, right? So really pay attention to your understanding of how to create the culture and maybe some of the disconnects that maybe your team members are having in producing that desired result, right? Next here, we have what is contributing to the production and growth of the organization. Oftentimes, there are specific ideas or specific ingredients, if you will, that are going into production, going into growth. And oftentimes your team members may not necessarily know what those are. So doing a fantastic job of communicating what those factors are is especially important. Sorry, my screens are blocking my PowerPoints here. And then here, lastly, how are staff individually supported to be their best selves, right? And that's really important. Oftentimes, we can get connected to the widget or whatever it is that we're producing and lose track of the people, right? And so understanding culture really is to pay a ton of attention to people and not necessarily to the results, because if we pay the right kind of attention to our people will produce at that level that we desire them to, or we will know much more quickly if we have the right people. And that's a trick in and of itself, really identifying and knowing if we have the right people. Oftentimes, individuals interview extremely well. They say all the right things. They give all the right energy. But then after some time, when they come on board, it's a little bit different when we get them in-house, if you will, when they actually join our organization. So that is a more of a test period. And I don't know how many of you out there are I'm blocking it now, like trial periods or something like that, where you can hire someone on, but you're hiring them on for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, trial period, just to see what the fit is, to see if they have the actual acumen to do that job. But I think that that's also a very important piece as well. I've used that in my past experience as well. And I think it's really, really important. And I will go as far as to say, even though I was using that trial period, that 30, 60, 90-day period to see if individuals I was hiring were a good fit, I never really let anyone go after, once they were on board. It's just more of a psychological thing to really see where these individuals are. I do see a lot of activity in the chat. Mitch, is there something out there? Question, thought, comment out there? Just want to break here for a second.
I think it's just us saying who we are, where we're coming from, and saying hello to one another so far.
Very good, very good. Thank you, sir, for that. Okay, so what does a good workplace culture look like, right? So here are some of the really PowerPoints, if you will, no pun intended, of good culture. High retention, inter-staff friendships, happy employees, transparency, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know each of you didn't know you would hear that phrase as much as you have in the last year or so. And then perks that work, perks that are relevant to the employees, right? And so really understand what it really looks like. Really kind of comes down to your people, right? And how connected your people are, right? And when your teams are really connected, I'm talking about personally connected, right? Professionally connected is important, and I would say even obvious, but the personal connection is not as obvious. But I think what we're experiencing in these times makes that personal connection that much more important, in that we've been more separated. That personal connection, that personal relationship becomes much, much, much more important. This has kind of been a hot topic always, right? Professional focus versus personal focus, right? How much personal involvement and how much relationship-driven activity should we have, or should it really be about just getting the work done and the systems and so on and so forth? And I think it's always been a wrestle. It's always been a back and forth. Is it about the people, or is it about the processes? And I think it's kind of coming to even more to the top now. I believe it's about your people, and your people really feeling as though you care about them individually as people. Okay. So let's get into creating culture and what that takes. I don't know, when I was at one of my previous employers, we had what was called a sandbox. Sandbox was really an environment where you can more or less test whatever it is that you were trying to implement live, if you will, right? And so the nice thing about the sandbox is that you couldn't break anything. You could within the sandbox, right? But it was really isolated. It wasn't really connected to the mainframe or anything that was live, maybe impacting internal operations or impacting your customers. It was totally isolated to the inside, right? So if you ever can, create more of a sandbox approach to your culture and trying to identify culture, right? When you first started and maybe your organizations have been going on for some time, whatever that is, someone created this idea of a sandbox to create or produce the desired outcomes, right? The desired outcomes, right? So if at all you can, make sure to create this kind of an environment, and we'll talk about this a little bit later and how you can create that environment. One of the ways that culture is created, though, here is in the hiring process, right? As a coach, I really pay a lot of attention to job descriptions, right? What individuals believe their job to be, what they feel their role to be, and so on and so forth. As individuals are recruited, if you will, they, whether it be by a person that is a recruiter, or whether it be by, Indeed or one of those platforms in that way, they are coming to know you by a job description, right? And so that job description kind of covers, hey, this is who we are, this is what you do, and this is what the qualifications will be. These are the qualifications that we feel you need to have to do a fantastic job within this organization, right? Now, when this individual is first kind of tinkering with this job description and who the company is and what the company is and what the company represents and what the company produces, they are already interacting with your culture, right? So by the time they're talking with someone, by the time you're getting to your interview processes, and I would say not so good if you're doing exit interviews, but the life of this employee and this team member has to do with your understanding of your culture, right? And that's really, really, really important. So this hiring process is really important. I do believe that culture, someone has to be, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So the hiring process is really important, okay? Work culture is cultivated through human relationships and connections. We talked about that a few minutes ago. And then examine what is creating a positive and productive atmosphere and keep doing that, right? So you have your systems, you have your processes, but I do believe that really driving relationship and the importance of that relationship is especially important. Here, I want to say I read a statistic that 80% of the individuals that leave a organization is leaving that organization by virtue of their relationship with their direct manager. If you think about that, that is 100% relational, right? It's not because they're not doing a good job, right? It's because the relationship, the culture within that relationship potentially is not good and is not healthy, or maybe just not a good fit for that team member, right? So really, really, really pay attention to the people, okay? Good. Any thoughts, any questions? Come on, guys, you got me talking too much. I want to hear what you're thinking. Question, thought out there. Anyone? All right.
Darryl, just jumping into play from the chat here from Evan, saying just in agreement that people more often do quit their managers, not their jobs.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Good. And who was that again, Mitch?
Evan, our good friend with Manpower.
Good. Thanks, Evan. Thank you for that comment there. And so just remembering again, as we're talking about culture, sure, we do want to produce. We need to produce, right? To pay people, we need clients, we need customers, we need to sell, whatever it is. That's especially important. I didn't say this before I actually started into coaching, which is, I would say, my life's passion and drive. I was in banking, and I was in executive leadership in banking for about 10 years. And so, one, I have a really good feel for people, but I have a really good feel and understanding of the importance of systems and processes, right? Like you need them both. You can't really exist one without the other, if you will. So that's kind of a really quick synopsis of my back story, if you will. Okay. So who is in charge of creating a great place to work, right? And I say here, everyone plays a very important and strategic role in developing a healthy workplace, right? And I say that, but ultimately someone within the organization needs to be responsible for creating a great place to work. For me, I believe it's human resources. I believe ultimately the buck should stop there, right? Someone within your HR, and if you're a one-man shop, two-man shop, it should be someone ultimately paying attention to and being responsible for the culture, creating the culture and making sure you're always in line, or you're producing, you're performing, you're following the values that are important to creating the things that you desire to do. I can't say enough about culture in the idea that you're creating something, you're producing something is growing within your organization. And this is kind of off the subject, on the subject, if you know that there's a lot of angst, a lot of bad feelings, and we'll just say that, not necessarily, that it's interrelational, if you will, or people related, if you will. If you know that something's going on, it's actually going to still create something. It's still going to grow something, right? And that's the point. If what is growing within your organization, within the people or within the client, is something that you do not want, really get in there and begin to ask some really critical questions, right? And that's when we talk about assessment. Start getting with the individuals on your team, or start getting with your clients right away, right? Because one, when we talk about everyone within the organization, okay, got that. Someone is ultimately needing to be responsible for the culture, for producing and growing what it is that the organization is desiring to produce and grow. I will throw this in. We talk about cultures, and we're surrounded with culture, right? American culture, family culture, school culture, work culture, department culture. These are all kind of ideas of subcultures within an overarching culture, right? So let's say you have have an organization. That organization has a culture, but then you get into, let's say, systems within that overarching organization, and within that systems department is another culture. We're going to call that a subculture within a larger culture, right? And there are very many times where the overarching culture is conflicting with a subculture, right? And that's the thing that I have been called into as a coach most often, that there is a conflict within culture. You have this overarching culture, but then you have this subculture, oftentimes, not all the time, but most times, driven by a manager, supervisor, or a member of that team that's really conflicting. And oftentimes that maybe conflict within the subculture is not addressed, or it's not addressed properly, right? And again, that's where you really do need to get in there and address and really kind of confront the confrontation, if you will. All right. And I will say that too, because conflict resolution is a really big deal. I believe conflict resolution is a really good thing because the conflict is really giving you some insight, right, into what's working and what's not working, and why. Okay, and so I'll just leave that there because we could go on for some time there. Okay, just checking my time. Okay, assessments. So when we're talking about how do you create this culture, for me, it's assessments. And when I say assessments, and I'll get into all of these here, when I say assessments, it's really having the conversation with the people that matter and with the people that are doing the work, right? Because you can talk, this is me, right? I've been, and I love this about my experience, I've been at the top or second in command of an organization, and I've kind of come in at the base level, entry level, if you will. So I've kind of worked myself up, and I've kind of just started at the top, right? In either case, whether you start at a base and you work yourself up to a leadership position, or you start at the top, it really is about understanding your people and getting into your people. The other thing, trust. And I'm connecting these thoughts to assessments. Trust and safety are really, really, really important. Anytime you have someone that feels as though if they give their honest opinion, if they give us their honest opinion, somehow they are going to pay for that. That is not a good culture. That's not a good situation, obviously. And then that's where the work for me as a coach needs to begin, right? It's really to get in there and create this safe place. One of the things that I oftentimes say once I get on site, and I'm talking to those stakeholders, I'm talking to those individuals that are leading or guiding, is I say, I need to create a safe place, right? And oftentimes it's merely, the safe place is merely the conversation that I'm having with this team member or this leader, right? If the leader or the team member feels as though the things that they're sharing with me somehow will result in a negative response or a negative interaction with that individual, that is a surefire way to not be able to repair or create the culture that you currently have within your organization, right? So safety and trust is, I would say, that is the driver. Everything is sitting on that, right? In that way. Assessment. I don't know how many of you, when you've had assessments in the past, feel as though the assessments go nowhere, right? I would raise both my hands, both my feet, if I could tell you the number of times that I've taken assessments and nothing happened with the assessment, right? It was well-intended, good information, great questions, but it didn't go anywhere, right? So right off the top, I would say assess. Assess by asking the right people, asking the people that are doing the work. Yeah, sure, you can ask your supervisor, you can ask your manager, or even you as the owner, you can have your own opinion of it, but make sure to ask your people. Ask those individuals that are in the field, that are doing the work, that are, kind of experiencing the times when it's not working like you ideally imagined it to work, right? So creating the action plans, right? And then following up on those action plans. So this is how it goes. You have your assessment. From your assessment, let's say you have a 5-question assessment or a 10-question assessment. You'll identify 1 or 2 of these questions to really create an action plan around. Once you create that action plan, this is what we're going to do to close this gap between what we desire and what we're actually experiencing. So you have your ideal and you have your reality. There's a gap there. Someone's going to be responsible for closing this gap, and what that document, if you will, that will help to close that gap will be the action plan. Just give me a thumbs up or makes sense, or something in the chat so Mitch can let me know that you guys you're still with me. Okay. So then the action plans, right? You have your action plans, and then the follow-up on the follow-up. That's what I call it, the follow-up on the follow-up. You have your action plan. This is what we're trying to do to close this culture gap, to close this production gap, or whatever that gap might be within the organization. And then someone is going to actually have it on their calendar to follow up on, are we making progress? Are we following through? Are we doing the activities within the action plan that we said we're going to do? And I would say assess often, maybe twice a year for sure. If it's really bad, 4 times a year, right? Like to really stay with the pulse of your organization, but you need to create the action plan. You need to create the follow-up. Now, with the action plan, again, get your people involved. Ask them, what will it take to close this gap, right? So I'm really big on employee engagement, right? So employee engagement has to do with the expectations individuals have, their experience, and then lastly, their satisfaction, right? So, right, this is kind of in my head, it's kind of all going together, right? So when I say assess, right, we're assessing then, this is what you expected, this is what you're actually experiencing, there's a gap, right? And then satisfaction is to say, how big is that gap? The satisfaction is going to give or be an indicator to how big that gap is from what I expected it to be from what it actually is. If that makes sense to you, give me a thumbs up or say that makes sense, because I feel like I'm I'm covering a lot of ground. Go ahead.
Darryl, you have a question in the chat if Mitch wants to read it.
Okay.
Yep. I think going back to what you were saying about safe places and creating these assessments, just have a question about how you go about creating that safe place. Even when leaders have the intention to create a safe place for feedback, employees might still not feel comfortable that they won't get repercussions for that. So are there any specific things you do to create that safe place?
Yeah, so I think, Mitch, and individuals on the line, this is why when you get into assessments, and I have it here, confidentiality, the other word would be anonymous assessments, is so important. But I've worked with organizations that didn't necessarily have as large of a budget to be able to keep it anonymous, right? And so again, I mean, you can imagine if you can't keep an assessment anonymous, and when I say you can't keep it anonymous, I was the one that knew, right? But I'm saying even me as the coach, even me as that kind of third party, not knowing who's giving the feedback, and that is really important in that way. So again, when we talk of how to do it, one would be to bring in a third party. That would be ideal if you have the budget to bring in a third party to kind of run that assessment and that survey through. And then two, to really just kind of put it all out there. Hey, this is, we really need your feedback. And again, I'm talking about if you don't have the budget to bring in a third party, we really need your feedback. This is a safe place. This third party individual, the information stops there. Even in those instances where I'm coming in doing the assessment and I know who said what, when I'm talking to those stakeholders, if you will, those managers and supervisors, I'm using specifics. Sometimes they know the specifics that I'm referencing, right? But again, trust is so important, and you can't get away from it. You just can't get away from it. So as much as you can, confidentiality is really important. Anonymous surveys are really important. And yeah, trust is really, really important, right? Yeah, it really is important that way. Good question. Great question. Okay. And again, if you'd like to talk more about those assessments and how we do those assessments at Jumpstart, would love to have a conversation with whomever on that. Okay. Organizational assessments take a look at areas of the company to find out what works and what doesn't work. Right. There are oftentimes, and I think many of you would kind of maybe smile, laugh, or chuckle out loud when there are times leaders in certain positions think things are working that really are not working. And that's where the assessment is really important. But that's where I would also say that there's a breakdown in the culture, right? You're trying to produce something, and what you're trying to produce, you're actually not producing. And one of the dangerous, I would say, really bad parts about that is that you may not even know that you're not producing it, right? Like you will know by virtue of not experiencing the desired results. But really, when you go to put your finger on why, you'll get some really vague responses, or you'll hear something like, yeah, we don't really know what's going on, right? If we're saying things like, yeah, we don't know what's going on or what's going on, it's time for us to do a culture check. It's time for us to get a pulse of where individuals are, and I would say to do an assessment. For me, I think an assessment is really kind of quick and easy, you know, but you know, that's your own experience there. Okay. Ask direct questions. And again, the questions have to be very specific. Here is really important. Ask hard questions. Ask hard questions. Ask the hard questions. And sometimes we intentionally, whether it be the managers, the owners, or the team members and the contributors, the individual contributors, don't ask the hard question, or they actually are actively avoiding the hard question, right? Because they may say something, your team members may say something like they don't really want to know the truth. They don't really care. All they care about is this, or all they care about is that, right? But for me, one of the telltales I always ask is, what are the questions that people are asking, right? You know, not necessarily the statements, but what are the questions? Like, why do we have to do it this way? What if you know it's not working? You know, and statements are always good and important too, but what are the questions, right? Because the question is communicating a gap in understanding. That's when we ask questions in general. There's a gap in our understanding, right? And so ask questions, ask tough questions, ask hard questions. But then again, to the point, if we can't create this culture of trust, this culture of this safe place, then asking the tough questions will be equally kind of on that same plane. Okay. We talked about confidentiality, anonymous. Anonymous is obviously no one knows. Confidentiality is someone knows, but they're not going to necessarily communicate that in an open forum that way. Again, I've had nothing but success in that. That's really the only way I can do my work, right? Like if I can't do work in a confidential environment, in a trusting and a safe environment, then I really can't do my work. Okay, and sorry about that. And then the last one here, employees should evaluate things as as organizational structure, workflow, outcomes, client satisfaction, and so on. Okay. And again, I would be willing to talk about any of that with any of you and how Jumpstart can help there. Okay. Research shows from the 2021 Global Culture Report shows company cultures provide a critical competitive advantage for organizations, especially in times of crises or times like those that we are experiencing right now. Workplace culture is made up of 6 key elements. Here you have purpose, opportunity, success, appreciation, well-being, and leadership. So when we say purpose, the word that I want you to write down here for purpose is the cause, right? What is the cause? The cause is what's triggering The cause is what's bringing the person, your team member, to your organization, right? Your cause is really I would say, the driver of the culture there at your organization. So when we talk of purpose, we're talking about the cause, right? Something that your team members are connecting with. They're connecting their skills, their abilities, their talents to this cause, right? Opportunity. Opportunity has to do, in this context, the growth and the opportunity for advancement, right? Like that's a really big thing. And if your team member feels as though the opportunities for growth and advancement, whether it be to grow and develop their skills or to grow and develop and move within that organization, either of those is especially important, and pay really close attention to that. Even as the dynamics, generational dynamics are changing, the expectation here within the operation within opportunities is changing as well. So pay really close attention to that. Success, making progress to a goal. Anytime you're making progress to a goal, you are a success. Your organization is a success. Your department is a success. Oftentimes we can get it twisted that we didn't make it to the maybe ultimate goal, but we do see that we're making progress. If you're making progress within your department, within your organization, from a culture standpoint, you are a success. Appreciation, thank you goes a long way. Noticing goes a long way. Paying attention goes a long way. For me, I hear a lot of feedback in a negative or unhealthy culture, which is the statement would be, "What have you done for me lately?" Right? So that is a culture really that is not appreciating its people, or the people are not noticing the effort and the attempt to appreciate them, right? So paying close attention there. Well-being. This is an area, even at Jumpstart, we have what is called a RAP coaching session, which is Wellness Recovery Action Plan, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. One of our coaches, and I want to say I heard Julie pop in just a second ago. She is a certified wellness coach, and we do a fantastic job there. When we talk about well-being, it really is to understand people first within the culture, and do the people know the organization cares about them personally, not cares if they're actually filling the gap, not cares if they're actually doing their job, which is really, really important, right? But cares about them as an individual. Hey, we noticed this, or hey, we're just going to offer this to our people just to make sure that you know that we care about you and that we want you to be well, right? And then lastly, leadership. Here, when we're talking of leadership, we're talking of influence and our ability to move individuals in the direction that we desire them to move in. Here, as far as leadership is concerned, a lot of my background had to do with, if you were a high producer, then you were more apt to be put in a leadership position and managing people. And as I don't know if that is your experience, but I have seen many, many times that your high producers don't necessarily manage people well or manage departments well, right? So it's important to have that individual in a key position to be able to speak, maybe train, right? But to lead people, sometimes we can pull an individual out of their strength, if you will, right? In that way. Let's keep moving here. Any questions, any thoughts that you all have out there? Anything that you're seeing out there, Mitch, at all?
No, just more agreement with what you've been saying so far.
Okay.
Feel free to hop in with questions, anybody.
Good. All right. So when we talk of COVID, I mean, it's kind of been the thing that's driving our culture, the American culture, if you will, and global world culture, if you will. And so these are some of the things that kind of at a very high level want you to pay attention to. Excuse me. So when we talk of the strategy to producing the right culture or the ideal culture, talk about as we were moving, as we always move, and again, understand this that I'm about to say in the context of change and necessary change to remain relevant. Necessary change to remain relevant, right? And to be most visible, to be most effective, to be most efficient, right? So anytime a dynamic changes within our world, right? So now we're dealing with, let's say, a health, but let's say we've dealt with economic change, right? That was really severe. So how do we stay relevant within these points of change, right? So what changes were necessary then, right? As we were going through the event, what changes are necessary now, right? And so we're always trying to get to this place called the new normal, right? And as we're trying to get to this place called the new normal, we have to be very careful when we are setting the goal, right? And this is a real big driver as we set the new normal, right? And specifically in terms of the culture, right? As we set this new normal within this culture, really, really, really pay attention to what it will take to produce, what you thought this other culture was going to produce, right? So think of it this way: I had this widget, and this was the culture that I produced the widget in, and I have all of the measurables to produce this widget in this culture and in this environment. Well, all of that has changed. Now you need new data. Now you need new information, right, to determine what it is that you need today, right? Time is a big one. What you need in terms of time to produce the same thing that you were producing a year ago, then 2 years ago, then 3 years ago, right? And again, I'm talking really high level and moving really, really fast. But I think you get the gist here. There are 3 phases of crisis response that each leader should know. Those are respond, recover, and then thrive. I believe right now we're kind of bouncing back and forth between 2 and 3 at this point. But how your company emerges from the effects of COVID is going to be especially important. But again, it's very, very, very doable. Again, I believe it's through assessing and paying really close attention to what our people are saying, okay? Keys to creating a great workplace culture. This is a website that I pulled some information off of. These are, kind of always going to be relevant. Develop a mentorship environment. Individual that's new comes to your organization. Make sure that they're connected with people. Make sure they're connected with people in a very, very real way. Advocate collaboration through building a sense of community. What are the things that you're doing as a department, as an organization, to get to know each other a little bit better? Offer people freedom to manage their own schedules. I know that that's been going on a lot just by virtue of some of the requirements that have been out there, but since some of those requirements may be loosening a little bit at this point, what are some of the freedoms that you can still keep out there as more carrots, right? Things that you've seen. And there was a statistic, and I can't remember the statistic offhand, but that said that some individuals, as they have been separate, have been more productive, right? So, which is very interesting if you think about that, individuals being more productive, but you're also needing to maintain this connectedness within the individuals on those teams. So that's a real thing. And then helping people to develop their skills and skill sets. Training is really important. I can't tell you how many times individuals are new to an organization. The organization does not have appropriate training for them, right? To really immerse them in the culture or to allow them to have the right experience with the culture. So if that's their kind of introduction to your organization, which is little to no training that is going to really impact their productivity and that effect on your clientele directly as well. And then lastly, create space for the employee to achieve personal goals. I will say to goals, I've been in really high intense, if you understand banking is a really high intense goal setting atmosphere, right? Like goals were the driver. And like I said, I've been out of that environment for 7 years. So I'm not necessarily connected to it as much these days. When I was there, it was all about the goal. It was all about production. It was all about, getting these accounts in. I will say, when the goal is high or too high, when stress increases, when anxiety increases, creativity decreases, right? And if creativity is decreasing within you or within your organization by virtue of stress, anxiety, desperation, and the like, you're really not doing yourself or your organization a good service by thinking that, just jacking the goal up will get them to produce more. No, it's an actual counter result, right? And we can talk about that if you'd like at some other time. Okay. All right. With that being said, we're still doing pretty good on time. What questions, thoughts, and before I do that, I just want to get to this last screen and then we'll come back to the questions, Mitch, here in a second. These are some of the ways that we've helped other organizations. Really would appreciate the opportunity to maybe support you and your culture or with any of these areas that we've helped with accountability for. This is my contact information here as well. And really look forward to connecting with some of you. All right, Mitch, any questions, any thoughts that you have out there?
Yeah, well, I have one of my own to ask, just as we go about creating culture. If you're an employee, if you're not a decision maker or not somebody who can say what our core values are, but want to improve the culture or feel passionately about enhancing it in some way, what can you do from an employee perspective to help change the culture of your organization?
Yeah, it's going to take a bit of courage, right? Like if you got anything, you will need courage to just make the step out there, right? Because oftentimes, as we've mentioned, Mitch, the consequence of stating that something is not working can be a very bold, maybe even shocking one, right, to individuals that are decision makers. But it will really take you, others, to be courageous or to be brave, right, to make that step out, right? And I would say you have to have the conversation, right? Like I've not seen it, Mitch, where change happens without a conversation, right? They don't happen. It just doesn't go anywhere, right? Like you can, an individual can think, well, hey, I'm just not going to say anything, or Susie or Billy, they already said something. And so what good will it do for me to say something? Because Susie or Billy already had that conversation. Well, I would say be the owner of that information, because it really is impacting the individual, whether you be a supervisor, manager, or business owner, or whether you just are an individual contributor. It's impacting your desire to want to do that thing, right? And that's where you start getting into production. That's where you start getting into time off work. That's where you start getting into sick time, right? So it's just going to snowball if you don't get to it and address it right off the bat. And if those individuals, Mitch, as you say, are not courageous, if they're not just brave and just taking that step out there. Great question. Come on, I know we have some players out there. I know we have some.
Just have Julie, I think it is on the side here, just mentioning that if it's a shared thought, that you can have your other coworkers and colleagues support you in that effort. And at least just present the idea in a more unified way. But no, I like that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And to that point, that's one of the ways or approaches that we use with one of our clients, right? It wasn't just a one-on-one. It was more of a 5 on, we're going to share something. So it wasn't just, just the way one individual felt, but it was a lot of major players, how they felt. And it was a very, very healthy environment, right? So it wasn't we're pointing fingers and all of that. And that took a lot of work, as you can imagine. But it was a group effort. They came in a pack. It was a pack effort that way. Lily, I'll just read this out loud if it's okay, Mitch. Lily says, thank you. Yes, as a leadership team, we spend significant strategic meeting time to develop and establish our core values. And we emphasize that our intent is to make all decisions through the lens of our core values. Yes, one of the things in developing is that we did a lot of whiteboarding, yes, including talking a lot about current employees we admire most, yes, in their work, their character, their commitment, et cetera. What do you see in them, and how do we emulate that as we develop the values we want as an organization? Yes, we have a kind of a general name, Lily, for that individual. We call them Joe. They're the average Joe or the old Joe, right? And so what is Joe doing, right? And so we just put it, we don't necessarily connect it to anyone. Or what is Susie doing? And Susie is the ideal one, right? And Susie is a real person, but not necessarily always is there just one. It might be 10 Susies, it might be 30 Joes, right? But you're really honing in on these individuals have tapped into something, and how do we tap into what they've tapped into, right? And so that's a really good thing there, Lily. Yeah. All right. Mitch, help me out here. What are you saying out there, Mitch?
I've got a question here from Kelsey.
Okay.
I'm a manager and notice that another manager is starting to create a negative environment. How do you keep the environment positive for the employees as change is starting to be made about the manager in question?
Yeah, so I would probably ask, what is the relationship that you have with this other manager, if it's a close one or a not so close one? And then if it's, you're a manager, you have another manager, if your upline, if you will, are the same or different, it's going to impact what I'm sharing now. If your uplines are different, you can talk to your upline and say, hey, can you mention this? You can mention it to your upline that they can kind of cross over for you, if you will. If your relationship is healthy enough, you can have that conversation. If the respect, I would say, is high enough, you could have that conversation directly there. But really, it's, as you can see, it's a conversation, whether it's going up, having the conversation there, or going directly across, having the conversation there. And let's say you both have the same supervisor, right? It's still, you would be asking your direct supervisor, hey, I'm noticing that there's some kind of negativity or whatever, undesired behavior, whatever that might be, coming out of this conversation or this other group. What do you think? What do you think I can do differently to maybe help support this individual there? It's kind of this, let's call it reality, right? And everybody handles and deals with reality differently, right? I feel like, hey, this is what it is. My mindset is, how do I do what I'm trying to do even now? What do we need to do? Some individuals may feel shut down. They may feel like it's hopeless, right? I don't have a chance, if you will, right? But it's about putting those people that are hopeful in the right place to communicate, one. Two, those people that feel like, hey, this is hopeless, they feel that way for a reason. Let's get them in a conversation. Let's get them in a feedback feedback loop where they can give their feedback. We can take their feedback and we can we can respond to their feedback in a very open air kind of a way. You say, well, what does that look like? Hey, as we've been getting feedback from our different departments and different leaders, these are some of the topics that we feel are kind of top of mind within this organization because we care about you as people. These are some of the things that we really encourage you to do, so on and so forth, right? So really, again, conversation, having that, and opening it up, right? It might not necessarily even be a one-to-one, right? It might be a 1-to-5, like we were just mentioning a second ago. It might be manager to manager, right? But have the conversation and don't hold back. Don't hold back, right? Face it on head on, and I know you will.
Awesome. Love this question. Another question coming in from Evan here.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier, good culture involves perks that work. What are some examples that you've seen of perks that work versus those that do not?
Yeah, so perks that work have to do with some flexibility in what they do and when they do it. Time off, personal time, working from home. To me, those are kind of relevant, like I would say no-brainer perks, right? Like that's the easiest thing you could do, right? Like just give a person the opportunity to come in late, leave early, determine, hey, you're going to work at home this day or days, you're going to be in the office this day or days, that kind of a thing. And again, when you're dealing with a high performer, you're only juicing them up even more, right? You're only like kind of energizing them. You're not taking anything away from them by giving them that flexibility and time. Things that don't work. I don't necessarily, I can't say something specifically, but the things that don't work are things that don't necessarily motivate people, right? Like I wasn't a money motivated person, right? Like I was, I'd like money. I wanted it if I earned it. But if you throw $100, if you say $100, I'm thinking, okay, you can keep that and I'll just do this, right? It wasn't really that kind of a perk, right? So making sure that the perk that you're presenting is actually motivating and not having a reverse effect where it's kind of like, yeah, never mind, I won't do that, right? That kind of way. So things that don't work are things that are not motivating to produce the desired result, right? Pay attention to that. Yep. Good question, Evan. Very good question.
We'll not sing anymore, and do feel free to hop in the last little bit here, but just looking at our time, just want to say thank you again, Darryl.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming and taking the time to provide us with your expertise for our informational session. On behalf of the Chamber, once again, just want to recognize today's video resource library sponsor, AFNI. Encourage everybody to check out our resource library at mcleancoatchamber.org for more content on growing your business. And just once more, Darryl, thank you. I know we're going to get those slides out to everybody who is here live on Zoom. Those watching this in the recording, you should be able to see those slides just below the video there. And barring any other questions, that will conclude our business education today on creating culture. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you on our next presentation. Darryl, thanks again. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks to the Chamber, and thanks everyone for attending.